Right now at 4:30, yet another unprecedented move. Maine's Secretary of State is removing former President Donald Trump from the state's presidential primary ballot. This follows a ruling earlier this month by the Colorado Supreme Court, which also removed the former president from the ballot. The Maine Secretary of State and Colorado Supreme Court both cited the insurrection clause, with other states considering similar moves. But unlike Colorado, where the decision to remove Trump was made by their state Supreme Court, in Maine, the decision was made by one single person. Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes joins us now. Khalif, this has become so interesting. This is kind of unraveling so fast here. Whether you're a supporter of the former president or not, this move has now been thrust into the spotlight here in terms of the legality of this move. Maine is now the second state to invoke the 14th Amendment. In your opinion, do you see the U.S. Supreme Court stepping into all of this?
Whenever you have a difference of opinion on the court side, that is the only place for the Supreme Court to step in. Constitutional issues where courts of appeals can't make a decision. You have conflicting courts, specifically Michigan Supreme Court most recently, and you have the Supreme Court in California making two different decisions. The logical next step is our highest court to make a decision, to make a ruling. And sometimes they make a ruling and say, we're only talking about this specific case. And most of the time they'll make a ruling like Roe v. Wade, where it's no, we're talking about for the whole country. What we need is guidance because we're talking about the highest office in the land. And so for us to do that, they need to make sure, well, what are we all looking at? The insurrection clause, I think it's what every state is looking at. And then who can make that decision? As you mentioned, in Maine, it was the Secretary of State. And that's in every state. Every state, the Secretary of State has the obligation and the duty to ensure that their ballots are right and they are correct. And if a person is eligible or ineligible to be on there. Those other states, what happened is folks, individual citizens, have challenged his ability to be on the ballot before the Secretary of State could even do it. In that Maine case, the Secretary of State said, well, I don't need another challenger. I believe that he shouldn't be on the ballot, so I'm going to walk within my authority to remove him from the ballot. The problem is that no one else is saying, well, why did you do that? What made you, what prompted you to do that? There was no one that was concerned, like the other cases, about 14 or 15 had already been removed.
And I know some Trump supporters would say, hey, he's never been charged with an insurrection or rebellion, so how does this even come into play? But as you mentioned, the person who made this decision in Maine was the Secretary of State. She contends that, quote, Trump's occasional request that rioters be peaceful and support law enforcement do not immunize his actions. Trump was aware of the tinder laid by his multi-month effort to delegitimize a Democratic election and then chose to light a match, end quote. From a legal standpoint, Khalif, how challenging is it to prove that case?
This is going to be the hardest problem, not for individuals that are arguing before the Supreme Court, but for the individual justices that are there, because it seems like the last few things that have come before the court, if you're talking about abortion or LGBTQ things, they've been across party lines. But this case is going to really challenge them to the legal core. Why? Because most of the folks that have been put on the bench, even by former President Trump, are strict constitutionalists. These are folks that believe that the Constitution, you have to read the text of the Constitution, as opposed to someone that says the Constitution is a living document, and as it grows every day, we should look at it from a different perspective. Well, if you're asking these individuals to look at the text, the original text, it says a person that has engaged in insurrection. It doesn't say a person that has been convicted of insurrection. And it says all you had to do was have been engaged in insurrection and swore an oath. Those two things are pretty cut and dry. And if you go back to the original statement, which is you have individuals that have been normally strict constitutionalists, a strict constitutionalist will say that text is pretty clear.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the constitutionalist versus conservative on the U.S. Supreme Court and how that might all
typically those two line up, and we'll see if it does in this case.
Thanks, Khalif, for breaking that all down.